ba la 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 la. Weeping Beetroots.
Hi, this is Eric from Weeping Beetroots. So this is going to be the first video of 3 where I'm going to discuss basically the evolution of my homemade crossbows. So just to put it out there, I'm not a crossbow maker or an expert in the field or anything. I've learned, I think, quite a bit over the last few weeks or months. From reading and from videos, all kinds of online resources, as well as a book or two. But I'm still an amateur, don't know that much. But I thought I'd have some fun. Just lockdown gets to you, and I think most of us have had the need to do something over lockdown. Some hobby that you just get into and just keep yourself busy. And then I came up with this, which will be the subject of this video, the first sort of step in the evolution of my homemade crossbows. So, the bow is just a simple plastic ruler. The stock is made out of simple popsicle sticks, actually. And I've simply glued them together. I think I've got 10 here, glued together. And then, as you can see, I just cut a groove down the middle there, using a simple chisel and hammer. The stock, though, the popsicle sticks aren't as wide as the ruler itself. So then what I found is, if you attach the ruler to the stock, it'll sort of flip down like that, very easily. So I needed extra width to the stock itself. And then I just added another, you can see there, a stack of more popsicle sticks, which are just held in place with strings and rubber bands that go through these holes here that I drilled there, and there's a hole there. So the strings, this is just cotton thread or string, very cheap, just buy it from any hobby shop, easy to use. So just use that to hold these in place. And that, as well as some rubber bands there to hold the ruler, hold it onto the stock. It's not very tight, but it does the job, it works. The string itself is also some cotton string, so you can see there it's just these two, two strings there, twisted together, and then in the center here I've wrapped it with some sellotape to keep them bound and to make the string a little bit fatter so that it can engage my bolts, which are just pencils, simple. It still doesn't work all the time, but I'll get to that later. Okay, and then the string is attached to the bow using more rubber bands there and there, and yeah, that works very well. So then the trigger block, if you can see there, is made up of 2 popsicle sticks, which are, well, I think I cut them in half basically, and then I cut these little notches in them there on both of them. They are glued onto another piece of popsicle stick here that forms the base, so they're glued onto that piece, and then there's a screw, you can see there, driven through both of them. That's meant to keep them together, give them some extra rigidity, and it works nicely as an extra pin, which can work as an anchor basically for these rubber bands, which are also very necessary. So that's basically the trigger block. It then rests or sits on the stock, via the screw. It rests on the stock there, and then the whole thing twists with this axle here. So basically this piece and this piece come from a little, like a miniature easel for miniature painting. I don't know who does that, you know, it's quite a weird thing, I think, but you know, I found that in a hobby shop, and you just take it apart, and this longer piece, you know, is nice for some, to actually be the trigger itself, which is nice. It gives you some leverage. And then this one acts as the axle for the trigger block, as you can see there. It just twists around that. Now the whole trigger block has to be pulled with all these elastic bands, has to be pulled up and back, because this string, the bow and the string, although it's a tiny force, you can see it's not much, it still does act, you know, these are still forces that act on the trigger block, pushing it forward and slightly down. And then so you don't want that to just, you know, if the trigger block was just free floating or whatever, free hanging, it would just pull it back and shoot, you know. It wouldn't ever, the trigger block would never hold the string back. So you need these rubber bands as a spring to pull it back. And that's what they do. Lastly, I used another piece of wood from this little easel here as a little axle for this little popsicle stick there. And that one just acts as a bolt clip, but it also acts as a guide. So what I also found with this string, as I told you earlier, it's not really fat enough to engage the back of the pencils. It'll easily just fly over them. So this then acts as a little guide for the string. You know, it keeps it engaged on the back of the pencil. And it works very nicely, I think. So it's simple to load. I can just show you. You have to just, you know, lift the bolt clip, pull back on the string, pull it all the way back over these two popsicle sticks onto the trigger block till it engages. Then you can, you know, again lift the bolt clip, put your pencil in there, and then it's held in place, you know. It's got just one rubber band holding it there, but that's enough. You know, the pencils are very light, so it's enough to keep them in place, no problem. So then, to shoot, basically just set this up like that. Hope you can see. And then, if you can see that, we can fire it's point blank range, but you know, you'll get the idea. And then, you know, just shot it into the cardboard there. You'll see there's a tiny little hole there. Not much, but you know, it works, it does the job. So yeah, it's a good bit of fun. Now, that's basically it there. I did, however, also want to make a bow out of the popsicle sticks themselves. So what I went with is, because the problem is you can have a bunch of them together and, you know, they've got a bit of flex and everything, and they've got some strength, but they're actually, you know, such bad quality and so thin and everything that they will either break too quickly or not bend enough, and it's just not great for a bow. So what I went with is what the Chinese used to do for their crossbow lathes, or bows. As far as I know, they mostly used composite bows, but one thing they did was to use bamboo strips, and they would layer them in such a way, sorry, let me just get this off, that the bamboo strips would be get progressively shorter. So you'd have the longest one forming the length of the bow, forming the back of the bow, which is facing away from the bowman. And then each subsequent layer or strip would be shorter, so that you would get, you know, in the center, you would get a good 5 or 6 layers of bamboo, and at the very tips, only a single layer. That's necessary for the bow because a bow needs, the limbs have to be thinner and weaker and need to flex more than the center, which has to be quite thick, so that you get an even bend across the whole bow. And that's what you get with this, you know. If you've got the very thin, you know, single strip at the ends, at the tips, then they can flex more. And the center, which has 5 or 6 layers, is then much stiffer, which is what you need. So I did that with the popsicle sticks here, as you can see, and it turned out okay. I've got to say, I'll quickly string it, and you can see there, it's you know, you can pull it. It's quite stiff and strong. It's got a bit of power in it, quite a bit of kick, I think. The problem is it's just so short and has, because it's so stiff and short, it's got such a short power stroke or draw length that, you know, on a bow like this, I would have to put the whole trigger block so far forward. It would, you know, I don't even know if I could attach it properly. Could it even, you know, move forward? Would there be enough room for that? What would you use for ammo? Because the pencils would be too long, they'd just drop off. So I'm not sure if that would work. And to be honest, I was too lazy to do the whole, you know, go through the whole schlep of making a new one for it. But I think it was a nice experiment, you know, just making like a layered bow, layered lathe, like the Chinese did. So that was interesting. Hope you enjoyed it, and please leave any comments below.